What's up, y'all? Cliche Dude back at you with another episode in the A Movie a Day series. How is everyone doing today? In this video, we are going to be tackling or briefly going over the 50 movies that I watched in November of 2023. And that is by far the most movies that I ever watched in any given month. And one reason is because I had this week off. So this week alone, I watched 18 movies. Not including today being Friday because it is a new month, so I haven't watched a movie yet. But yeah, so Monday through Thursday, I watched 18 movies. And part of that reason, besides just me being off, is because I realized that I was falling behind my goal of comfortably watching 420 movies this year. Of course, I call this series a movie a day, but as y'all know, if y'all have watched this whole series, the goal is 420 movies just for the memes. So now I'm back on track to surpass that by about 10 or 15 movies. If I can commit hard enough, I might be able to do 450 movies by the end of December, but I'm not gonna like super stress over that because that's gonna be like 49 movies. So I'm probably not gonna hit it that hard. So realistically, I'll probably hit like 435. Next year, I think I may try for 500, but we'll worry about that next year. Anyway, I want to try to keep this video under an hour, so let me get past this overly long intro and jump right into the movies, and we're going to just fly by these for the most part. Starting things off with Apocalypse Now, a war movie starring Martin Sheen, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, Nicolas Cage's uncle, if I can talk, for those of you that didn't know that. Not relevant. I just always like pointing out that little factoid whenever I get the opportunity. Anyway, Apocalypse Now, a war movie, which of course is really an anti-war movie. Most war movies are anti-war movies, but that just kind of like flies over people's heads. But that's not the movie's fault that people don't get that. But I digress. Apocalypse Now, an unsettling movie. One thing that I didn't know going into this movie is there is an actual animal death that takes place in the movie that they show on screen that's very brutal and caught me off guard because I didn't know anything about it. First time watching Apocalypse Now. I know that's blasphemy. But yeah, there is an on-screen animal death. And when I saw it, I was like, whoa, did they kill this animal? And I won't go into the specifics because it's pretty brutal. But I'm like, did they kill this animal just for this movie? So I did a little bit of research, and apparently the tribe that killed the animal was going to kill it anyway. I can't remember if it was for a ritual or it was something. I don't remember the specifics. But so the film crew, so I'm assuming it was Francis Ford Coppola's call, not 100% sure on that, but that would be my guess, to include the animal death in the movie. I guess just to show the brutality of the people, I guess. Um, I don't know what the overall feeling is of that scene, if anyone cared. I don't know if I don't think it's chalked up as like animal abuse because in movies like Cannibal Holocaust, there was animal abuse specifically for the movie, and people called him out on it, or at least they mention it nowadays about it being problematic. I don't really hear that about this scene in Apocalypse Now, so I guess it's okay, but it did catch me off guard. But Apocalypse Now is a good movie. I definitely do think it is worth a watch, and I think you should watch it. It just does. Again, it's uncomfortable because it's war, and war should be uncomfortable. Anyway, moving on to Annie Hall. I said I was going to breeze through these movies, and I talked about Apocalypse Now for like 2 minutes. Anyway, Annie Hall, a fun little. I think it's labeled as a rom com, but it is funny. Don't get me wrong. But it is. I don't want to call it sad, but it's emotional, which I know rom coms can be sad, and obviously they're emotional. But I wasn't expecting for Annie Hall to hit me in the feels as much as it did, and I won't go into specifics. I will just say I do recommend watching it, and don't look up like the things on how on what happens. Just watch the movie and enjoy the movie. I think it is worth the watch. Moving on to King Kong from 1933. So going into this one, again, I've seen clips of it, obviously, like I think most people have. I was expecting it to be just like kind of hard to sit through just because of the technology from back then, which I can appreciate old art, obviously. Like I love older movies. But sometimes with like the stop motion effects and whatnot, if it's like filled with that, sometimes it can be kind of hard to sit through. That's not the case for this movie. King Kong is actually used sparingly, and even then, like it wasn't as like quote unquote bad. I don't want to call it bad. It's just dated. I guess is the term that we use. But actually watching it, I think like it works, and I think it holds up, and I think it's actually like worth watching even like from a modern audience standpoint. And this movie was a lot more brutal than I expected it to be with some of the character deaths, particularly on the island, where like there's people like just falling to their death, getting killed by dinosaurs, of course, getting killed by King Kong, and it looks pretty brutal. Like even in black and white, and even from the 30s, like I wasn't expecting it. I will say, and I'm going to forget everybody's names just because a lot of information I'm trying to keep in my head and I don't have notes. But the dude who like kidnaps King Kong, he's responsible for everything that happens in the movie as far as like people dying, like going to the island, interrupting this culture that wants to be left alone, then kidnapping King Kong, bringing him to New York, and then King Kong escaping. Like this guy should be arrested for like what should be considered war crimes, basically, or at least arrested for reckless endangerment or something. But then at the end, he's like congratulated for having an idea to use the airplanes to kill King Kong, and then he wants to drop the poetic line of "'Twas beauty killed the beast." He made me so mad, and I'm like, I felt like I was being gaslit by the movie to like this guy who sucked. Um, but I did like King Kong, a great movie, and I think it holds up. Moving on to Bonnie and Clyde from 1967. Just being from Louisiana, being a good old Southern boy, I'm not gonna say I look up to Bonnie and Clyde, being bank robbers and whatnot, but I've obviously like been around like the stories and whatnot, and just like the history of Bonnie and Clyde, and seeing that put the screen was very fascinating. And I didn't know Gene Wilder was in this movie, and he's not in it for long, but he has a couple scenes. Like it's not just like a very quick cameo; like he's in it for a few minutes, and his natural, like just comedic timing is just great. Love him. Really, real standout in the movie, and one of my favorite parts. But Bonnie and Clyde definitely was an enjoyable movie. Moving on to Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump, I hear from people that it gets worse every time they watch it. I don't know if that's the case for me. I still enjoy it, but I understand why people don't think it's as good as like people say it is, I guess. But I do think it's still a fun movie, and it's still fun to watch. Are there problematic elements? Yeah, I mean, most of the movies I cover have problematic elements, especially the older ones. But um, I think, I mean, Forrest Gump is a classic for a reason. Not much more I could say on it. Raiders of the Lost Ark, the original Indiana Jones movie, also problematic elements, but a fun movie. And I think like it's obvious why this started a franchise, with the Indiana Jones character. There is the like, I don't want to call it like a nitpick that people have, but a criticism I guess people have of the film about, you know, Indy doesn't really play a part in the movie's ending. Like things would have played out the same way whether he was in the movie or not. I think that's okay. Like I don't think the protagonist has to have like an active part in the outcome of the movie. Just I think you can follow a character on a ride, and then like I think that's okay. So I don't think that's. I'm not saying those criticisms are wrong. I just don't think that's a negative with the movie. Anyway, moving on to Sunrise. I didn't write the full story or the full title. I think it's Sunrise: A Tale of Two Lovers, from 1927. Uh, a lot of old movies have this thing with like love triangles with married people and whatnot, and sometimes, at least with this one, um, like the quote unquote home wrecker, like gets her comeuppance, I guess you could say, but yeah, I just have this, I don't like all the extramarital affairs in these older movies, and it makes it kind of hard to watch sometimes. But I mean, it was a fun little silent film from the 20s, so it's fine. Moving on to Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. Not a movie I expected to like, but this was actually a great movie, especially like by the end. A lot of good witty dialogue, which y'all know I love. And then there's the little plot twist with the son at the very end. And I'm gonna like, I need to start speeding these reviews up, or not reviews, but you know what I mean. But Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf definitely deserves its place in the history books. History books. Moving on to The Devil's Rejects. This is the first one on the list. I think not in the AFI Top 100 because I do still need to finish that list. But The Devil's Rejects by Rob Zombie, of course, a sequel to House of a Thousand Corpses and a prequel to Three from Hell. The Devil's Rejects, probably Rob Zombie's best work. Of course, it is a I mean, it's what's the word? I don't want to say necessarily a gritty movie, but it's like a dirty movie, and not in like an overly sexual way. Which I mean, you know, there are obviously like sexual stuff in it. It's a Rob Zombie movie, but it's just like a rough film. But I think it does its job very well. The only thing that kind of really ruins this movie when you go back to watch it is the ending, because of what Three from Hell did retroactively to kind of mess up the ending. I won't spoil it too much. Sometimes I spoil movies, sometimes I don't. There's no rhyme or reason to it. But The Devil's Rejects, probably Rob Zombie's best work. Moving on to The Grapes of Wrath from, I think it was 1940, about, you know, Great Depression, trying to find, you know, trying to move to find better life places, and just like the banks and stuff kicking people out of their homes. A very sad movie, and I don't want to say it's relatable as in like no one's kicking me out of my house, but with the house market being the way that it is and the economy being the way that it is, I think we could have a Grapes of Wrath in 2023 coming up on 2024, and people definitely be able to relate to it. Moving on to The Gold Rush, another Charlie Chaplin. I was about to say Charlie Sheen. Charlie Chaplin, of course, silent film. Um, this is maybe my fourth Charlie Chaplin movie this year, and it's praised as one of the best ones. But for me, I hate to say I didn't really care about it. Um, and the more Charlie Chaplin I watch, like, and to be fair, I think I'm becoming biased because as I'm watching these movies, I am like doing research into stuff afterwards as well. And I hear, or I read kind of like Charlie Chaplin, and I don't know the validity of it, but apparently he was either a great businessman or kind of a douche of a person. Um, and I don't know, apparently, like, I just keep hearing just kind of like negative thing, or keep reading like negative things about him and like with the people that he worked with and such. And so now whenever like I watch his movies, like it's kind of tainted, and maybe that's not fair to the movies, but it's not like I intentionally do that. It's just kind of like subconsciously a thing that happens. But anyway, moving on to Megamind, a classic, a great movie, a superhero movie or supervillain movie that subverts a lot of expectations, a lot of tropes that we've come to like know by the mid 2000s. Just a great movie. Will Ferrell, I mean, well, really the whole like voice acting cast does a phenomenal job, and just Megamind is great. And what's the difference between a villain and a supervillain? Presentation. Just a great movie. Moving on to The African Queen, a movie where people fall in love because of circumstance, and they know each other for a day, and it I don't know, it's hard for me to like, you know, I watch those movies and I'm like, why was this seen as like romance instead of just being weird? And I know it's just a movie. It, you know, it holds up fine, I guess, but that part, just any of the like the fast track love, really any old love story, or just love stories in general, are just so weird to me when it comes to film, but it's fine. Moving on to Sophie's Choice. I've heard the expression Sophie's Choice. I didn't realize it came from this movie, I think that's correct. I thought it was the other way around, where this movie was named after the saying, but I think it was the saying was named after this movie. Anyway, Sophie's Choice, another love triangle movie where this Meryl Streep's character is with this guy, and then they have a friend that comes a part of it, and you think that Sophie's Choice is about which lover is she gonna choose. Without spoiling it, that's not necessarily the case. Please go watch Sophie's Choice. I believe I watched it on Tubi for free, if I'm not mistaken. I definitely watched it for free if it was on Tubi. But I'm pretty sure it was on Tubi, so I definitely recommend watching it, and I won't spoil it from there. Sophie's Choice, a great movie. The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, just a good old Western about these cowboys looking for gold in Mexico. And it was fun. There's a lot of tropes, a lot of like paranoid type deals of like, oh, are they gonna steal my gold type thing, and misunderstandings and whatnot. That I'm sure this movie helped like pioneer those tropes. But it's a fun movie. Is it worth going back to watch if you don't necessarily love westerns? Probably not, but I'm glad I watched it. Moving on to, I can't read my own handwriting. Upgrade. I thought the U was a V and I got confused. Upgrade is a great movie. I saw this movie in theaters years ago without knowing anything about it, never seeing a trailer or anything. But basically, it's Venom, like a year or at least a few months before the Venom movie came out. As far as like this man has this entity, it's a microchip that can talk to him and can just help him out and stuff. And I won't go too much further there. And the lead actor, forget his name, but he gives off Tom Hardy vibes. So I don't know if when they made Upgrade that they were thinking about copying Venom or if it just kind of like worked out that way. But I think Upgrade is definitely the better movie. It's really fun, and I definitely recommend watching it. And there are a few intense scenes as far as like graphic violence that I just love, but just know that going into it. But Upgrade, a phenomenal movie, and I highly, highly recommend it. Moving on to American Graffiti, is another one, and y'all probably hate me for it, but just the weird love things with these older movies. And this one is about this basically child. I don't remember how old she was, maybe 14, that like, it's most of the movie. And this isn't like the main focus of the movie, but it is one of the plots, maybe like the C plot of the movie. She rides around with this dude, and they kind of end up falling for each other, and he's like 18, 19, something like that. He kisses her like on the cheek or something like by the end, but it's kind of played as a romance, and it's weird. Um, and I don't remember if they try to have sex at one point, but that is one of the hard things about watching these older movies is the problematic elements that you feel like should have been problematic even back then, especially when it comes to dating a child. But moving on. Midnight Cowboy. This is one of them that I think the reason it's on the AFI Top 100 is because, if I'm not mistaken, it is the first movie that explicitly had homosexual interactions. I could be wrong about that, but one of the reviews I read said that. But it's just an okay movie. That is one thing about the AFI Top 100 is they're not the 100 best movies of all time. They're just 100 of the most important movies, and I'm guessing that's why it's seen as one of the most important movies, is because of that element. But it was fine. The Philadelphia Story, which didn't know this one was going to have Jimmy Stewart in it, so that was a nice little surprise. I love Jimmy Stewart. And there's shenanigans with, people trying to pretend other people are people that they're not, and that's where the comedy comes from. In this day and age, is just kind of like, it's played out a little bit, but that's not the movie's fault. But it does do the thing with love triangles where this lady got a divorce, trying to move on, there's like she's interested in like three people in this movie, and that's just, I don't know. It's always weird to me whenever, just again, love stories are weird to me. Maybe it's because I'm single AF and divorced, but it's just, they're just weird to me. Moving on to Shane, a Western. You already know, like, Westerns are not my favorite genre ever. Shane didn't do anything to change that. It was fine. Not much to say about it. Lawrence of Arabia. So it's definitely a white savior movie, but it's almost like it subverts that, because at the end of it, Lawrence kind of doesn't succeed in his white savior attempts. But being that it came out, what I want to say 40s, I didn't write the year down. I don't think their intention was to subvert that trope, the white savior trope. Um, so I don't know. I do hear complaints about the white saviorism of Lawrence of Arabia. Uh, but then again, you watch it, and like by the end of it, it's like he kind of fails in what he was trying to do. It's a good movie, 3.5 hours longer, however long it is. But I think it, I think it's paced fine to where it's not terrible to like make that runtime. But yeah, the Boondock Saints also on Tubi for free. Tubi needs to sponsor me. Like, but anyway, the Boondock Saints. Fun little movie. Love Willem Dafoe. I didn't realize Norman Reedus played one of the brothers, but that's cool. But yeah, the Boondock Saints almost feels like a Tarantino movie at times, with like everything's not necessarily in chronological order. Like they'll show the end of event, the end of an event, and then backtrack into like what happened, what caused those results, and that's always fun. But yeah, the Boondock Saints, really really fun movie. I think like it's good for, it's not like the best movie of all time or anything, but I think it is a real fun movie. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, going from a Tarantino-esque movie to an actual Tarantino movie. And this movie, like, it did get accolades at the time, but I feel like it's not like held in as much reverence as some Tarantino movies. But I love Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's kind of a movie that does like not a whole lot happens except towards the end. Like you have a character at the twilight of his career, and Leonardo DiCaprio's character, and then you have his stuntman, and then you have, oh, my mind just went blank. Margot Robbie's character, playing Sharon Tate, and you're trying to see where she falls into it, especially if you don't know the history. And maybe that can be seen as a criticism, is if you don't know the history of what happened with Sharon Tate, maybe this movie won't have as big of an impact on you. Of course, Tarantino, he does the history revisionist thing, but it makes for entertaining fun. And Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, especially by the end, it builds up, and then the end happens, and it's like, holy crap, that was awesome. This is why we watch Tarantino, and I think Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is an excellent Tarantino movie. Moving on to Three from Hell, the third in the trilogy of The Devil's Rejects. And this movie, sure enough, is a movie. Came out way, like, what is it, 14 years after The Devil's Rejects. The actor that played Captain Spaulding passed away right before this movie debuted, or maybe right after. He was sick, so he's not in the movie much. So they had to replace him with a new character who was never mentioned in any of the other movies. And Three from Hell almost feels like a retread of The Devil's Rejects. They hit a lot of the same beats, but don't do it as well. And then at the end of it, whereas in The Devil's Rejects, now I'm going to spoil the end. I said I wasn't going to spoil it when I was talking about The Devil's Rejects, but here I am. At the end of The Devil's Rejects, they supposedly get killed. They're riddled with bullets. And then Three from Hell starts, and they just retcon that by saying, oh, they're shot like 20 times each. There's a 1 in a million chance that they'll survive, but they survived. And then the movie happens. And then by the end of this movie, they don't die. They just ride off into the sunset. And it's like, okay, Captain Spaulding's character, or Captain Spaulding, he is the character, He does die in the movie, spoiler alert, but very early on, like the first 5 minutes. But other than that, like the other three, so R2, Baby and her brother, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, and then his brother, are they all siblings? I don't remember. He didn't really leave that much of an impression. He wasn't a bad actor. He's just, yeah. Um, but yeah, it felt like an unnecessary movie, for sure. But it's yeah. Anyway, moving on to It Happened One Night, and this movie, I'm trying to remember it. It happened one night. This is one problem when I don't recommend watching movies as much as I do because they don't always, a lot of them get lost in the shuffle. It happened one night. I know it's a romance movie. I don't remember if it was a rom com. It obviously didn't leave an impression. I think this is the first time where I've like completely forgot a movie. It almost happened with Double Indemnity, but I don't have a lot to say because I honestly don't remember it. And I guess that says enough, doesn't it? It was in the AFI Top 100, so I'm sorry. It happened one night, did not leave an impression. Did it happen one night? Maybe it didn't. Moving on to It Happened One Night. I think I remember which one it was. It's okay. I remember it. Sorry. It's where this rich girl is trying to leave her like because I can't remember like if she wants to marry this dude. Her dad doesn't want her to, so she tries to leave, and then this reporter follows her, and they ride this train together. And it was one of those things where they kind of like fall in love when they spend like a day together. It's one of those, and that's why a lot of times these movies get like mixed around in my head because a lot of them are very similar. Like they hang out with this random person and fall in love. Okay, um, but yeah, so I'm glad that I remembered what it was, but it's okay. Um, a Streetcar Named Desire had nothing to do. I thought it was going to be like a Herbie, like the Love Bug type situation. I guess because of the name Streetcar, nothing to do with that. It's a movie about a lady with like I don't want to say mental issues, but she's very stressed out, and then her sister's husband or boyfriend, no, they were married, played by Marlon Brando, is abusive, very like uncomfortably, like hits the main character. So Blanche is the main character. And I can't remember names, but the actress in this movie is the same lead actress from Gone with the Wind, and she's just as annoying in this movie as she was with Gone in the Wind. And I feel like, again, I feel like these movies are gaslighting me into thinking that these are either good people or think that I should root for them. I don't like them. In A Streetcar Named Desire, the only character that is worth liking pretty much is Blanche's sister, who is one of them. She's the abused wife. Um, but it's kind of uncomfortable to sit through, which I know it's supposed to be. But and like I know like Marlon Brando was like praised for his acting and whatnot. But again, it's just it's weird that it became as popular like as it did, I guess. Moving on to Schindler's List, we're like halfway done, and well, I guess I'm at 30 minutes, so I guess I'm making good time. Schindler's List, a phenomenal movie, a little over 3 hours, but by the end of it, like you kind of want it to keep going. Um, Liam Neeson does a phenomenal job as Schindler, and of course, like this movie being, mostly based on a true story. Schindler was an actual person who helped free people from the, Nazi camps, from the concentration camps, Auschwitz and all that. Um, and I think like he freed over 1,000 um, I don't know if it was just Jews, because of course, like Nazis captured more than just Jews, but uh, I'll say he freed over 1,000 people. Um, but yeah, great movie. I honestly will say like it's very emotional. but in like a good way. Like I teared up and whatnot. I wasn't as sad. Now, obviously, let me let me backtrack a little bit. I was sad seeing all of like the horrific things that the Nazis were doing and whatnot. But I guess is at a point now in 2023 where that's such like you've seen it a lot as far as like the things that the Nazis did, where obviously it's still hard to watch. Um, but I expected the movie to. I sound. I'm gonna shut up because I sound evil the more that I talk. I was gonna say like I was expecting it to make me like to be sadder than what it was, but I guess because like he freed so many people, it's like it's a good kind of emotional, you know. Obviously, it's not good that 6 million Jews were like, or 6 million people were killed, but the fact that this one man was able to save over like 1,000 people and was sad that he couldn't save more is like I feel like it's an optimistic ending. Maybe I don't know. I'm gonna move on. Duck Soup. This is actually the first Marx Brothers movies that I ever watched and hilarious. Maybe too over the top with their comedy, but a lot funnier. Like I've seen like bits of like Groucho Marx, but I've never kind of like before like some people have seen like bits of Charlie Chaplin, but they haven't actually seen the movies. Pretty much the same. Like I've seen bits of Groucho Marx, but I didn't expect it to be as like over the top funny as it was, and I'm glad that I am now like introduced to like that brand or to to these movies, the Marx Brothers movies. Really fun time and was a musical, so I know like some people don't dig that, but it was still fun. I can't remember why it was called Duck Soup off the top of my head, but good movie nonetheless. Sullivan's Travels was a comedy, and it was kind of like, um, uh, I guess, a criticism of movies at the time where people were kind of scared to make comedies because of like the war and everything that was going on. Everybody was struggling, so people didn't want to make comedies because I guess like they were like, oh, what is there to laugh about? Like people are dying. There's a depression, whatever else, and then this movie comes along and says, hey, like it's okay to laugh. Like we're allowed to laugh even if times are tough, and I think that is an important message. Now that's not to say that you shouldn't make serious movies during hard times, but you can make a mindless comedy movie and that's okay. Just making people laugh is okay. Just having slapstick comedy for the sake of making people laugh without any deeper meaning is okay. And this movie is a reminder of that. And I'm glad that it exists. Easy Rider, starring, I was about to say Nicolas Cage, Jack Nicholson, and some others whose name escapes me at the moment. Um, it's kind of a depressing movie, especially because of the way that it ends. But it's a criticism of basically like it takes place during the counterculture, or like or it's about counterculture with quote unquote hippies and just the South particularly, just like not being open to like new ideas and just hating anything that's different, which I definitely know a lot about. Again, being a Southern boy myself, and especially back in 70s and 80s, they would kill you for it, and this movie reminds you of that, and it's pretty bleak. Moving on to Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Again, I'm not the biggest Western fan in the world. Having said that, this is a fantastic movie. It is such a fun movie. It's I don't think it's labeled as a comedy. I think it's just like seen as like a Western drama action movie, but it's hilarious. The banter between Butch Cassidy and Sundance, the Sundance Kid, they're so like just funny, and that's again, I'm big on dialogue, so that alone carries the movie. And there's a scene very early on. The Sundance Kid is like one of the best like gunslingers in the West or in America. Excuse me. And there's a scene very early on where he gets to showcase that, and it's like I love it. So yeah, really good movie. Next, Bringing Up Baby. um, I was not a fan of this movie, and I feel bad for saying that. Especially like I don't like criticizing movies, especially movies that are like praised, especially movies that are on like a top 100 list. Um, because I feel like I'm missing something, and I feel stupid. And but this movie annoyed the fire out of me. It's a movie where like obviously like a lot of comedies the characters are just stupid. Like you have the Three Stooges, the characters are just stupid. But this is one of them where the characters were stupid in an infuriating way for pretty much the whole movie. And it also did a weird thing with the romance angle that was annoying. Just like apparently all older movies love doing. Um, but yeah, and I was all maybe I need to rewatch it because I was kind of already having an aggravated day, I think, when I was watching this movie, and then watching this movie did not help. Like, by the end of it, I was just really annoyed, and I feel bad for saying that. But Bringing Up Baby, I was not a fan. Next up, A Night at the Opera, another Marx Brothers movie, and another one that I enjoyed. I feel like this one it kind of drug a bit. It wasn't a long movie or anything, but like getting to the end felt like more of a slog than like Duck Soup. Uh, but I think again, part of that is just me getting burnt out by getting through this AFI Top 100. Because like at this point, it kind of feels like an obligation, which I set that on myself. It's nobody's fault but my own. And I waited to the last stretch of the year to watch these movies. So these are movies that I'm watching not necessarily because I want to watch them, but because I feel like I have to watch them. Um, so, but again, it made me laugh. But then again, it kind of like I stopped caring about it by the end. But again, that's more of a me thing, I think, than the movie itself. So I followed that up by watching How to Train Your Dragon because that's the movie that I love. And what can I say about How to Train Your Dragon that you wouldn't already know about? It is a great, fun movie. A lot of heartfelt moments. Toothless is a great character. Hiccup is a great character. It's a good, touching movie. It makes me cry in a good way, and I love it. And it definitely is a good movie to get me out of a funk whenever I'm in a funk. And it got me out of a funk. Moving on to another movie that I now love. First time seeing it, and it is on Tubi for free. Definitely recommend watching it. Called Dave Made a Maze. It's classified, I think, as a horror comedy, but it's more of a fantasy comedy. There's not a whole lot of horror elements. But it's very fun. Very just I hate using this word, but it's kind of a quirky movie. Very dorky, but like in a really good way. And I don't want to spoil too much. Just watch it. Dave Made a Maze is I love it. It is, dare I say, amazing. I hate myself. Um, Next up, Dracula Dead and Loving It, a Leslie Nielsen movie. Um, just a fun little movie. Not really a whole lot I can say. Not necessarily one of Leslie Nielsen's most memorable movies, especially like quote wise. Not a whole lot that I can remember off the top of my head. But there's still like funny bits, and I remember when I watched it, I laughed most of the time. Not a whole lot of things fell flat for me, and it was a good time, but it was just a fun little comedy. Moving on to Candyman, not a comedy, just a horror. Great movie though. Great movie though. Candyman, the dead guy with a hook for a hand. Say his name 5 times in the mirror, and he will show up and kill you. Um, and yeah, Candyman. A lot of race implications that I will not get into because that's not for me to talk about. But just a great movie with just a great cast and just an overall good time. Definitely recommend watching at least the first one. The other ones aren't necessarily that great, but the first one is phenomenal. Okay, so starting off this week. So these are the 18 movies that I watched as of Monday. The Illusionist, starring I'm horrible with names when I'm put myself on the spot. Oh gosh. Fight Club and The Hulk and a lot of I had it and then I just lost it. A lot of Wes Anderson movies. Oh my gosh, yeah, I'll just start talking. Paul Giamatti is also in it. The fact that I can remember his name and not the lead is Jessica Biel's also in it. Edward Norton, jeez Louise, that was frustrating. But The Illusionist came out the same year as The Prestige, the classic Christopher Nolan movie. And people don't remember The Illusionist, at least in circles that I circle. People don't remember The Illusionist as much as The Prestige, but I think it is a great movie. I can see why people remember The Prestige more, especially with the plot twist. I feel like, and The Prestige is more like it's more of a plot twist, I guess. Kind of also more silly, but in The Illusionist, it kind of sums it up at the end with everything that's happened, and I think it's fun. I had a fun time. The next four movies I saw all on Monday as well, but these were in the theater. I did an all day theater thing. I was only able to watch four movies from like 11 to like 11 because they were all pretty much long. But started the day with Napoleon starring Joaquin Phoenix. I saw it in ScreenX at Regal. I don't think it's worth spending extra money for ScreenX. For me, it was just the first showing, and I have the yearly subscription or the monthly subscription, but I paid for a full year. So it only cost me like $4 to upgrade. So I was like, why not? But the ScreenX thing was kind of distracting. But the movie itself was really good. The battles were really cool. Especially there's the battle that takes place in like Russia, and there's ice involved. I didn't watch any of the trailers. I think they give this battle away during the trailers, though, and if they do, that is unfortunate. I didn't really know anything about going into this movie. I hadn't seen any actual trailers or anything, and that scene caught me off guard in a good way, and it was phenomenal. But yeah, Napoleon, a great movie. Maybe not necessarily historically accurate, but that's not necessarily why I watch movies. But yeah, it was really fun. Moving on from that, I watched Saltburn, and let me tell you, this was a wild one. So, there's three particular scenes that are like over the top, uncomfortable, and weird. And I feel like two of them are just for the sake of making you squirm. One of them, the first one, which y'all may have seen involving a bathtub, I felt like was to show that our main character isn't necessarily like he's not the sanest person in the world. But then there's like a quote unquote vampire scene, and then there's a scene with dirt, and especially that dirt scene, it felt like you're just trying to make me feel uncomfortable. Love the movie, and the movie may be worse without those scenes, but they stand out as being unnecessary. And then, speaking of unnecessary, the end is convoluted for no reason. It didn't have to. It did a weird thing where it tried to make you rethink like the whole movie because of like a plot reveal, and then it does the thing kind of like at the end of The Illusionist, but The Illusionist did it better in my opinion, where it kind of recaps scenes, except now it's in a new light because this thing was revealed about. I'm not going to give away too much, but um, yeah, I didn't feel like that was necessary. But again, great movie. I just felt like the ending, if it would have ended maybe like 10 minutes sooner, and not because of the length, but just because we would have had a different ending than what we did, I felt like it would have been better, but maybe it wouldn't be talked about as much. So I'm sure the filmmakers know what they're doing. The same director as Promising Young Woman, so obviously the director knows what they're doing. But yeah, moving on to Killers of the Flower Moon, I had to drive to a different theater to watch this one, so I was kind of in a rush. But without spending too much time on it, it was a great movie. Of course, a Martin Scorsese movie starring Leonardo DiCaprio. It was going to be a great movie, but hot take, I hear a lot of people saying this is Leo's best acting role. It ain't. Like, he's not bad or anything, but it's definitely not his best role. And he's not even necessarily the best actor in the movie. Still a great movie though, and I think it is an important movie to watch. Is it historically accurate? I've heard yes and no. I've watched reviews by Native American YouTubers who some of them really loved the movie, some of them had problems with it. I'm not in a place to really critique that part of it, but I do think it did its job with what it was trying to do as a movie. 3.5 hours long, so just know that going into it. But I think it is very, very well paced. That you don't feel those 3.5 hours. You maybe feel 2 hours, or at least that's the way I felt. Then the last movie of my movie day on Monday was Thanksgiving, and I don't know why I was so excited to see this movie. Maybe it's because like everybody on TikTok's saying it's like their top 10 movie, or one of their top horror movies of the year. Maybe I gave myself too much expectations, especially once I saw it was an Eli Roth movie, and I love the Hostel movies. I know not everybody loves them. I love Cabin Fever. I love Green Inferno. I did not love Thanksgiving. I actually hated the characters, which is fine, but there was no. So, like, when you hate the characters, there should be something else that makes you like the movie, right? So, like, something like Hostel. You hate the characters, but guess what happens? All the characters die, for the most part. And you don't watch Hostel for likable characters. You watch it for the gore, right? For the quote unquote torture porn. So I expected, and maybe that's my fault for having wrong expectations. I expected at least the gore and Thanksgiving to be up to par with Eli Roth's other work. In my opinion, it was not. The gore was very cheesy, not convincing at all. Again, at least to me. Maybe it was because he was trying to make it more of a mainstream movie as opposed to something like Hostel, but it didn't do it for me. I'm glad everyone else liked it. I personally was not a fan. Sorry. Moving on to another one on the AFI Top 100, The Bridge on the River Kwai. I think I pronounced it right. Maybe I didn't. I'm sorry if I did not. Starring Alec Guinness. Sorry, I just hit my table. Hopefully that wasn't too loud. Starring Alec Guinness. Another war movie. So this one, there's one particular scene about Alec Guinness, and I know it's not necessarily the point of the movie, but it's what resonates with me the most after watching it, where Alec Guinness talks about, like, him being at the end of his life, and just like, if he really made a difference as much as he like thought he did, if his life really left an impact like he wanted it to, and him not being so sure about that. And that is very relatable. And it's the main thing I think about when watching the movie, even if it's not necessarily the point of the movie. But yeah, The Bridge on the River Kwai, another one where I think it's 2.5 hours long. Doesn't feel as long as it is. The beginning does kind of like drag on more than it should before it actually gets into like the plot of the movie, but it's still a good movie nonetheless. I think whenever it comes to like a lot of these older movies that I watch, is the ones that like resonate with me the most are the ones that aren't like the love stories. And it's not that I don't like love stories, like I don't love rom-coms, but just the older ones seem like they're a lot more problematic than even like the war movies. But I don't know. Again, that could just be a me thing. The Last Picture Show. This one was a little more depressing than I was expecting it to be, but it was still a good movie. Some problematic relationships. There's one involving a teacher or not a teacher, but a coach's wife, and then like the coach's student. But I should expect it at this point, right? But it wasn't a bad movie by any means. Swing Time. This is, again, a man goes to get married, but he has to go to New York, ends up falling for another chick, and it's played for laughs. Ha ha, failed relationships. There's also a situation involving blackface, which apparently was supposed to be an homage, or maybe not an homage, but like a celebration of a black tap dancer. Obviously, that's not okay. Um, yeah, I mean, Swing Time, is it worth watching? I don't know. It's pretty problematic, but that's fine. Moving on to Platoon, which is another Vietnam War movie, except in this time instead of starring Martin Sheen, it starred Charlie Sheen, which is funny. Did they do that on purpose? Probably. Platoon is another one. Again, it's a war movie, but it's really an anti-war movie. It really shows you just how despicable people can be when they're put in those situations. So in Apocalypse Now, and you have soldiers killing Vietnamese citizens or like villagers and stuff who aren't even a part of the war, just like for no reason. And you see that again in Platoon, but you also see soldiers killing their own people. This one was it was a sad one to sit through, a sad one to watch. Um, People do get their comeuppance, but that it's sad because you know it's probably realistic and war sucks for everybody involved. And this movie makes sure that you know it. Moving on to The Witch. One of my favorite movies. I know a lot of people don't like it because it is very slow. It's an A24 movie. I think it was Anya Taylor-Joy's debut performance, if I'm not mistaken. She was in this one before she was in Split. Um, I love this movie so much. Robert Eggers, phenomenal. Especially to only have 3 movies under his belt at this point, but this was his directorial debut when it comes to full-length movies, and I think he did a bang-up job. Not for everybody. I understand the criticisms that it gets. You know, it does drag on. It's not a long movie, but it's slow-paced. And then I don't want to say the accent, but I guess the accent that people are, talking in the old English talk can be hard to understand. I watch it with subtitles, so it's fine. But just a great movie. The acting is just, I love it. And one of my coworkers got me the screenplay. And anytime I have a chance to brag about her, and the fact that she did this for me, and I love her so much for that, I'll probably end up doing like a full breakdown of the movie, as pretentious as that may be. Like once I get through the screenplay, I haven't like dug into this at all at this point. But I'll probably do a breakdown video at some point. I do want to do those in the future on this channel. But we'll see what next year has in store. But The Witch, great A24 movie, great, just a great movie. But again, if you don't like it, I understand. So I ended the month by watching the rest of the Tarantino movies that I hadn't seen, starting with Death Proof, a fun little movie. But what I did not know going in is that, so when I looked up with the Tarantino movies that I know, I see Death Proof when I looked at his filmography. Like I see Death Proof, obviously. Then I see Grindhouse. I didn't really look into it any further than that. I didn't realize that Grindhouse was just like a combination of Death Proof and then Planet Terror, a Robert Rodriguez movie. I don't know why that doesn't sound right. I'm pretty sure it's Robert Rodriguez. I'm sorry, same director as from Dusk Till Dawn. My brain's falling apart. I'm so sorry. But I didn't realize that Grindhouse was just a combination of these movies. But I just watched the movies individually. So I watched Death Proof and Planet Terror. A lot of reviewers say that Planet Terror is better than Death Proof. Not for me. Planet Terror's okay, but it got way too silly, way too quick. So like from Dusk Till Dawn, I always want to say from dawn till dusk, but from dusk till dawn, it got silly over halfway through. Planet Terror is silly from the beginning, and it's just like, it's too much. It's too much silliness, at least for me. Death Proof, it isn't a silly movie. It does a thing where it kind of switches genres. Like, by the end of the movie, which I love. I love the idea of movies switching genres, and I wish that that was a common thing. Like, I want to see a horror movie turn into a comedy, or a love story turn into a horror movie, or I love the idea of that. And this kind of does that by going from like a thriller slash horror to like a revenge thriller by the end, and it's great. But again, Planet Terror was not for me. Planet Terror was intentionally made that way. I understand that, but it doesn't make me feel any different. Again, I don't hate it. I just think it does. It's just too over the top for my sensibilities, I guess. Last two movies, Jackie Brown and The Hateful Eight. Jackie Brown is such a good movie. Um, just again, I say it all the time, but just the acting is great. I love how Tarantino directs dialogue in his movies. I know not everybody's a Tarantino fan, but I love every one of his movies. Jackie Brown is no exception. Such a fun movie. Um, Chris Tucker has a part in it very briefly that I didn't know about. Uh, but it's a fun movie, and it does a thing where, of course, Tarantino does things out of order sometimes, and this one isn't done as severe, but it does it kind of towards the end where it's showing different perspectives on events, and it's just a fun movie. Another movie that does that is The Hateful Eight, and another really fun movie. And I think they released a longer cut of this movie, broken up into like episodes, where like a 4 hour total. I haven't seen that. I just watched the actual movie, and it was great. It was fun. I love Tarantino. Again, I know that's not necessarily the popular thing to say at all times, depending on who you're talking to. A lot of people hate him. A lot of people think he's overrated. Yes, he's weird. Yes, the thing with the feet is off-putting at times, but I love everything that he does for the most part. But yeah, so that was the 50 movies that I watched in November. I will not be watching 50 movies in December. I will probably keep up the movie a day thing for next year. I don't know if I'll do these movie videos where I like recap every single one, because I feel like whenever I do it off the top of my head, I feel like these videos aren't substantial enough to exist. Like, again, I mainly make these for me, but for someone who's not me, I don't know if these videos matter. So I may start doing it to where I just go in depth on like one particular movie, like I want to do with The Witch. But I don't know. We shall see. But I think that is a good place to wrap it up. I'm almost at an hour, so I need to go ahead and cut it off. As always, thank y'all for watching. If y'all have any requests, recommendations, suggestions, or questions, feel free to leave it in the comments below. I hope everyone has a fantastic day, and I will see y'all later.